In this tutorial, we will take a look at the MongoDB adapter functionality in data services. I will explain to you how to use this adapter to load data from a single primary node or secondary node in a replica set and from a shard cluster, and use different techniques such as the native MongoDB login credential, username and password, LDAP, and Kerberos authentications, and using SSL certificates to connect to a secured MongoDB instance. MongoDB is a cross-platform, document-oriented database, classified as NoSQL database. MongoDB does not use the traditional table-based in relational database structure. Instead, it uses a JSON-like format to support a dynamic schema, making integration for certain type of application much easier and faster. It is especially popular in big data initiatives. In 2015, MongoDB is ranked the #4 most popular database, and it is also the most popular document stores in database management systems. With the native support for MongoDB, you can now use data services to read your hierarchical data from MongoDB and perform additional transformation natively before loading the data into another database for big data analytics, such as SAP HANA. The MongoDB adapter is implemented based on the Data Services Adapter SDK library. Because of this reason, you must create a MongoDB adapter in the Management Console and start it before you can set up a MongoDB data store in the Designer. You can set up MongoDB data store to connect to a single primary MongoDB server, or use the replica set option to fall back to the secondary node when the primary server is down. If you connect to a shard cluster, you must enable the shard cluster option. By default, data services will always assume the MongoDB server that you are trying to connect is the primary node. However, if you set the replica set option to yes, then you must also provide a list of secondary nodes with server name and port number respectively that you defined in the MongoDB replica set. Because shard cluster can be either a replica set or a single primary node. When the shard cluster option is set to yes, data services will automatically ignore the replica set option. Instead, it will try to connect to the MongoDB router to access the data from the shards. Also, data services support many different ways for you to connect to a secured MongoDB server. Depending on your server configuration, you can use either the native MongoDB login credential with a username and password, or using the LDAP or Kerberos authentication to authenticate the login user, and use the SSL certificates to create an encrypted link between the MongoDB server and the data services client. Since MongoDB doesn't have a defined schema, data services will need to scan a sample set of documents in the connection in order to create a data schema. By default, the number of rows to scan is set to 10, but this option is user configurable. In MongoDB, each installation can have several databases, and each database can contain several connections. All connections are imported as documents in the data services repository. When reading data from MongoDB, data services will preserve the data in a nested structure. You may use the XML map transform to further manipulate the hierarchical data structure before loading it into the target system. In addition, the software can also support pushdown operations. For example, the filter defined in the where clause will get pushed down directly into the database. You can also use the query criteria parameter in the source to define a more advanced pushdown operations to maximize the performance output. The following demo will show you how to use data services to connect to a shard cluster router and use the router to load data from 3 different shards. To create a data stored in data services that is pointing to a MongoDB shard cluster router is relatively simple. All you need to do is to provide the hostname and port number that is pointing to the cluster router. In addition, make sure you provide the database that you're trying to gain access from. And don't forget the SHA cluster option must set to yes. If you don't do that, you will receive an error message from data services. Once the data store is set up successfully, you can view the external metadata directly in the designer and be able to import the data schema in data services. Once the data schema is imported in data services, we can now create a data flow to extract the data and load it into a different system. The next example, the source is now point to the MongoDB cluster router that we previously defined in the data store, and we will extract the data from the text connection in the document. The text connection data structure is relatively simple. It contains two columns, a voucher ID and a double data type. Since this is so simple, we will just use the XML map directly for the data type and load it into a document. Once the job is complete, you can see that 500 records are being extracted from the MongoDB SHA cluster router. To double check the results to make sure it is correct, I am going to use the MongoDB UI to connect to the same cluster router that data services is connected to. And you can see the result has 500 records. And if you look at the result, compared to data services, you can see the first few columns, at least like the order is exactly the same. And you can look at the data services result. If I put it side by side, you can see the data sequence is being extracted exactly in the same order. And also the results are identical. With this, I now conclude this demo. For more information, please visit us at help.sap.com/BODS and select the supplements for Adapters User Guide. Thank you for watching.